Right. Let's go ahead and get started. First, thank you all for joining us today. Kim and Patrick have some really great content for you all on exposing the dark web. Also, for those of you that are interested, we are going to be doing complimentary dark web scans and consultations after the webinar. So we'll go ahead and send that information out in our follow-up recap email. That way you guys know how to get in touch with us if you're interested in the dark web scan and consultation. That being said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. So who is the IronEdge Group? Well, IronEdge is the premier IT solutions provider for Texas-based businesses. We like to provide service-centric strategy and support to eliminate a lot of the frustration companies face with technology. And a lot of organizations in the Texas market use our expertise when their current provider lacks appropriate skill and resources to get them where they need to be, if they're continually frustrated by day-to-day IT challenges, or when they want to prevent catastrophic losses of revenue, clients, and IP due to a cyber attack. So speaking to that last point, today we have a really special guest. That's going to be Kim Nees from ID Agent. And Kim is focused on cybersecurity, is a member of the ID Agent team, which offers ongoing credential monitoring. Kim partners with companies just like IronEdge to help organizations better understand cyber threats and reduce their vulnerabilities. And based in our San Antonio office, we have Patrick Maese, and Patrick focuses on project development and the needs of IronEdge's clients. Patrick has over 15 years of experience in the IT industry, and he also does a great job serving as a mentor for other IronEdge team members. He graduated from Trinity University in 2000 with a bachelor's in computer science, and he became a senior partner for an IT consulting firm where he oversaw technical management of the company until around 2007. He stayed on board to ensure that there was a really smooth transition as a consultant, and then he transitioned from that role to IronEdge in 2009. So he's one of our founding members, and Kim and Patrick have a lot of great content for you guys. If you have any questions for Patrick or Kim, feel free to put them in the Q&A box below, and they'll be answering your questions live periodically. There will also be a live Q&A at the end of this webinar, so don't be afraid to ask us questions. Don't worry about holding them to the end. I promise we'll get to them. But all that being said, Patrick, Kim, go ahead, take it away.
Great, thank you. I guess I'll go ahead and jump in here. I'm really excited to see all of the attendees on the webinar. Patrick and I are very excited to talk to you today about cybersecurity and some of the threats posed to your business by the dark web. We're really hoping you find this conversation helpful, but also timely and relevant, and that you'll take away some key insights and tips to, at the end of the day, help keep your business safe. So, just kind of jumping right in, we've all seen these stories about data breaches. It seems like anytime you turn on the news or scan the headlines, there's always a story about the latest company that got breached, how it affected millions of users and included all kinds of personal data that's now out on the dark web. We've seen some really prominent, well-known and successful companies get wrapped up in these security breaches, and the numbers of affected users seem to grow and increase with every new incident. So, in fact, I feel like these headlines have become so prevalent and so normalized that I'm afraid we've almost become somewhat immune and don't really think about what this information can mean and the potential damage it can cause. We've become detached from the stories and the threats and the potential impacts, or we don't know what to do about it, and so we may do nothing. But I think we're at a point where we really have to confront it head on by answering some really important questions. Things like, what does it mean when our data, our company's data, or our employees' data is on the dark web? How does that data even get on the dark web, and why does it matter? and oh, what does the dark web even look like? What happens there, right? So during our time together, we'd really like to open this conversation up around these questions and focus on the current landscape of cybersecurity as it's impacting small to medium-sized businesses. We also wanted to see if we can maybe take away some of the mystique around the dark web, pull back that curtain just a bit, and walk you through some actual screenshots of the dark web where cyber criminals are buying and selling stolen data, as well as some of the methods that they're using to steal that data.
Yeah, Kim, real quick.
Yeah,
so
ahead.
There seems to be, I've seen this a lot of times with our clients and our customers, is there's a misconception that hackers are targeting big, high-value targets like the big 5,000 enterprise level companies, and that's not really the case. They're able to steal data, steal information, and use that data and sell it on the web, and it could be something as simple as email addresses, right? Email addresses and passwords is a great and a highly valued tool amongst the hacker community. So it's not necessarily that they're out after intellectual property with these companies. They're just looking to get as much information that they can that might be valuable out there and sell it on the web. And so we're going to dive into that today and kind of give you guys some knowledge and some idea of what that landscape looks like, what people are looking for, what they want, what they can profit off of, because it's really all about money for them. And so what we want to do is make you guys aware of the situation and what's out there and how you guys can protect yourselves.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point about the especially the risk to small to medium-sized businesses. Sometimes I hear that this false sense of security that we're too small, and as you've pointed out, that's very much not the case. And in fact, as we flip to the next slide here, we wanted to just kind of look at some of the ways that these breaches are happening, right? It's probably no surprise to anybody that the king of the hill here, the top way, is through phishing scams, phishing attacks. We've all seen those phishing emails, right? Those fake emails that appear to be sent from a legitimate company. They ask victims to provide some sort of sensitive information, usually through a link that looks like it goes to a company's website, but that website is actually a really clever fake, and the information you provide, what will become those exposed compromised credentials, go straight into the hands of the criminals behind the scam. And those details, obviously, they'll use to commit fraud, to sell them, as Patrick pointed out, a lot of money to be made, unfortunately, off those stolen credentials on the dark web. So super low tech, but unfortunately, very highly effective. The second most prevalent way you'll see here is through compromised or stolen credentials, but we may not be entirely exactly sure how they were obtained. And then we see some other methods here, right? Ransomware attacks. Those use that malicious software or malware, which is also listed here, that's designed to prevent access to computer or to data until a ransom is paid. We'll talk a little bit about this later on, but ransomware is typically spread through phishing emails or by visiting an infected website. Other breaches are a result of hacking or through brute force attacks, which are those trial and error methods where an attacker systematically tests possible passwords until they get a hit. So in my mind, as we look at this, we see lots of different ways that breaches can happen, but what we'd really like to emphasize here is that the majority involve credentials being stolen, right? This is, I think, really important for us to acknowledge. We have to think about the impact that those stolen credentials can have on your organization because, as Patrick pointed out, just a single compromised credential could result in a breach, stolen data, ransomware attack, but it all points back to those stolen credentials, whether that's through a phishing attack, a brute force attack, employees clicking on an email that they shouldn't, or perhaps downloading an attachment that has malware. All that starts at that human level. And so, I think as we look at this breakdown of how breaches happen, we really need to acknowledge that it's skewed toward human error. And I think this is essential for us to understand so that we can empower our employees to become more aware, more vigilant, and really understand the impact of what stolen credentials can mean. And I think we have to help them understand that it's not as simple as changing, a single password on a single site, but it's more than that. It's about the pattern. It's about having internal policies in place, and also about training team members to play that vital role in a company's overall security.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Kim. One of the things that we do in IT is we pay special attention to securing the physical parts of the network, the infrastructure, the firewalls, the hardware, the network, all that kind of stuff. And technology has gotten to a really good point where it's hardened that layer of the environment so well that it does a great job being autonomous in the security of your network. But as Kim pointed out, and as you can see from the slide, what these actors have found is the weakest part of these links is actually the human part, right? Is doing the social engineering. It's tricking people into giving up information where if that's the weakest part of your network and all of your technical stuff is as strong as it can be, they go after the weakest stuff. And so being aware of that, having awareness training, having users know what's right, what's wrong, what to be careful of is such a critical component these days to make sure that you're protecting your network. Because you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on doing the technical part, but if someone freely gives up their password, then it just opens up the door to your entire network and on all your data.
100%. And kind of to build on that, and just think about that for just a moment. I'd like to dig into this just a bit and talk about how those employee credentials can lead to a breach. I think this is a really great visual that helps us understand how real but also broad that risk can be. We're looking at 9 key functional areas of a business here, right? From HR and payroll to email services, all the way through to banking and finance, collaboration, social media, right? As you look through here, I'd like you to think about all of the places where your employees are going on a day-to-day basis to perform their regular job functions, right? All the places where they're creating accounts, they're using their work email addresses, and they're creating a password. I think we can be really great at addressing accounts and things on the network, but we forget about all of these third-party sites where employees are creating logins, and we have to think about those external threats. And in doing so, I think we have to talk about that human behavior piece and ask ourselves the hard questions. Are we confident that our employees are creating unique, hard-to-crack passwords for every single site they're using? Can we be sure they're not recycling passwords, or just as worse, adding that token character or two at the end and thinking it's all good, which I know I was guilty of that, because this is where that data on the dark web can come back to hurt your company, right? When these accounts are connected by common emails and passwords, when users are using that same or variation of the same login credentials on multiple sites. So, let's say, for example, I use Expedia to book my travel. Expedia experiences a breach, and I'm using that same password on Office Depot, where I have an account with a corporate card on file to make purchases. Or even worse, as Patrick mentioned, what if I'm using that password somewhere on the network? Once someone has that password to gain entry into your organization's network, they really do have the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. So I hope you can see just how the potential for damage dramatically increases from just that one, single compromised username and password.
Mm-hmm. And it's a topic of speed too. So once these actors gain hold of passwords, they're working as quickly as possible to try, because they know that you're going to try and go out there and change your password, because like Kim said, many times they're just reusing the same passwords at different services. So once they get a hold of passwords, if it's a new breach and they're able to get that password, they're going to work quickly to try and use that password at as many sites as possible, as quickly as possible. Knowing that, you may forget to change your password at, Expedia or Office 365 or something like that. And if they work quickly enough, they can get into there and then the damage is done.
You're so right. We often say there automated and motivated. We've talked about how they can make some good money, you know, and can also break into these, but they're also automated. So to your point, they can take that email and password combination and test it against, you know, hundreds of popular websites to see, banking on the fact that employees are reusing the same password across those. And I think that's a really important point. And in fact, you know, just a quick story, we talked to partners a lot, and I had a colleague come across through a dark web scan. A provider discovered dozens of passwords out on the dark web for a particular organization, and when reviewing with the client those exposures, the accounts payable person happened to be nearby and recognized one of the passwords from the old accounts payable person, her predecessor, who had left a sticky note. The password on a sticky note behind that indicated the same password was used to log into the company's bank account. Well, right then and there at the meeting with this client, they took that password and logged right into the company's Wells Fargo account and found the old accounts payable person not only still had an active account, but also that account had over $1 million in it, as well as access to lines of credit. And keep in mind, this person had left the company 2 years prior. So, you know, certainly, you know, good thing they tried that password on the Wells Fargo bank before a hacker did. And granted, you know, that's a pretty extreme story, but we do hear stories like this quite often. And even when a person is no longer at a company, they may still have active accounts on third-party websites. So it's really important that we, again, think about those external sites that our employees are creating as well.
I'll throw in a tip for you guys. Knowing that passwords are easily compromised, many services, if not all of them these days, are offering multi-factor authentication or dual-factor authentication, text messages or authenticator apps that give you like a little, you know, number key to do as a second form of authentication when you log in. That's a great way, if you don't have that already, to enable on as many services as you can, because if a person has your password, it's a second hurdle that they would have to get through to try and get that second form of authentication, which is very difficult. So I always recommend, if you have the ability to enable that on as many services as you can. And I know it's difficult these days, especially with varying levels of technical abilities within your user base. Some may have a little more difficult to use those kind of technologies. But in this day and age, adding that additional layer of security is such an important component. So we highly recommend and we encourage everybody to enable those sort of security features on your services to help protect yourselves.
I love that. And actually, that is a perfect segue into kind of our next slide here, which is this idea of a zero trust framework. That extra level of security, I think, plays in perfectly to this, which is this acknowledgement and belief that everybody has been compromised, right? That if we ran a scan on the dark web, which we hope to do for all of the attendees on this webinar, for instance, probably every person here would likely have something pop up. Maybe the severity of the exposed data would vary, but zero trust is this idea that we should operate under the assumption that we've all been compromised. Because once we accept that, we can really shift our focus to making sure that the right people have the right secure access, i.e. the MFA plays into that perfectly, right, to the right machines and with the right privileges. And at the same time, we're also monitoring for those compromised credentials and external threats. So this framework really lets us manage that individual access to make sure that we don't have team members accessing the network when and where they shouldn't, or logging into machines that they shouldn't have access to, or having privileges to sensitive data and applications that are well beyond what's needed for their particular job. So, you know, establishing this cybersecurity framework really allows us to identify and address any gaps. But beyond that, this zero trust approach also allows us to work towards alignment with compliance laws, which also, of course, dictate how we approach security and access management. Moving right in from that thought about compliance, you know, here's the thing about compliance. Compliance and privacy are no longer optional. We're seeing compliance regulations make their way around the world, and they're everywhere now. It started, of course, with the GDPR in Europe, which was that first entry into making compliance mandatory, and now it's here in every state. California and New York certainly set the bar here in the state by requiring even small businesses to have insights into what their employees are doing and how and when they're reporting breaches. So cybersecurity is really no longer a nice to have, it's really mandatory and something that businesses are now required to do as well.
Yeah, no, I act, so one of my roles at IronEdge is to act as virtual CIO and CISO in many of our clients where, you know, as many private companies, there's not any specific sort of regulation that tells them, you know, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z to be protected. There are some kind of open framework standards like NIST, for example, but we have, you know, we have all sorts of industries. You know, we have retail for PCI, we have banking, which is FDIC, we have SEC for trading, we have all sorts of regulated companies and industries that it's nice to have that experience because we can kind of pull different, you know, kind of cherry pick the best things from different regulations and apply them as a best practice to these organizations. But a lot of people will come to us or to me and say, where do I start? Because that's such a daunting task. And one of the things that we can do is, and if you haven't looked at it, NIST is a great resource. It's a government framework to use to start building a security framework against. And that's something that's basically open to everyone to use and start building a security framework. And so that's what you can use to start creating or start looking to see where you know, where your risks are and your gaps, and start building a security solution for your organization.
I love that. I love how you describe that too. I think a lot of people look at compliance as something you just kind of are or you just get to, and it's a process, right? And it's all about consistently working towards compliance and getting better and better at it. But you got to start somewhere. So I think that's a really important point there. I wanted to circle back and talk a little bit about these phishing attacks, since that is one of the most, or the most prevalent way compromises and breaches are occurring. Not surprisingly, we've seen a surge in COVID-related phishing scams, and lots of them, right? I think the FBI has warned that even with year-over-year increases in phishing scams, it's picked up even more, as noted by the FBI here, who warned of the growing threat coming. The pandemic is kind of this dream come true for criminals who rely on deception and creating a sense of urgency to achieve their successes with phishing campaigns. So these past several months have presented a huge opportunity to snag victims. During a crisis, we're more on edge, we're seeking out information and direction and guidance, and it's really this perfect time to capitalize on the uncertainty, the rapid changes, and just the overall disruption, I think, that makes us even more susceptible to phishing emails. I think because we're so hungry for information and we're accessing information in different ways, maybe working from home, right? And at different times than normal, they know we're less likely to take the time to really examine a message and make good decisions about whether to open and click. So not surprisingly, you know, of course, we have seen this surge, right? And here's a real example that we pulled that plays on that need to stay up to date on the latest news and developments. This appears to come from the CDC, and it includes a link to a list of new cases in our area. Here we've pointed out some of the telltale signs that can help a user identify this as a scam: the fake email address, the too generic greetings, the poor grammar. But these messages really are timely and relevant, and you know, for the distracted and perhaps emotional and information-hungry users, I think it would be very effective as well. Just kind of running through these, another quick example. I think this one is another example that is tailored to a specific company. And in this case, it's requiring all staff to attend a seminar to learn about the virus and then complete a survey to demonstrate understanding. Since it appears to be sent from an internal team member, this could definitely be quite compelling to recipients who want to make sure that they're following all company directives and doing everything that they should. And then, why limit phishing scams to just email, right? Cyber criminals have realized that they can also carry these scams out through text messages as well. So, we've always got our phones with us. We're constantly looking at incoming messages. How easy would it be to be caught off guard, see a new text message, and click without really stopping to think about it? So phishing emails, are getting increasingly sophisticated, tougher to detect, but, there are steps that we can take to identify these scams. And, we've all been focused on good hygiene and washing our hands to decrease the risk of the coronavirus. But what if we applied that same hygiene to our email, right? What if we trained our employees to take at least 20 seconds to examine an email and look for those telltale signs? We know that there are things that we can look for to help weed out the scams from the legitimate emails. Here's a list of some of the things to look for. We can see, obviously, if the message includes that super generic content or that broad impersonal greeting. Always look closely at the email address, especially the domain. A lot of times it's off by just a single letter or number, and that's all it takes to tip off that it's a scam. Consider if the message is trying to create this false sense of urgency, or maybe it's got some strong, demands for action. And look very closely at any links before clicking it. Just a simple mouse over can really tell us if the destination looks legit or if it's steering us perhaps into a trap. Put on that copy editor hat, look for misspelled words or incorrect grammar or some weird messaging, and then finally, make sure it's a site that's secure before entering any sensitive data, and think twice, maybe even 3 times before clicking on any attachments. Most computer viruses are spread through email attachments, so although an attachment may look important, it could certainly have malware that could cause a lot of damage down the road.
Yeah, one of the things that IronEdge likes to provide with our clients is a security awareness program where it keeps a lot of the users on their toes, right? So if you're not vigilant about looking after these kind of things, then it's very easy to get tripped up and click on a malicious email link, not knowing you were clicking on it. So what we try to do is we'll send out email campaigns that we can report against to see who clicks on these kind of things. They're benign emails. We're not trying to phish these users, but we just want to know how susceptible the end users are to clicking on some of these links. And we do that internally with IronEdge, and I'll be the first to tell you that I clicked on them myself, and I suddenly get, oh, you got caught, and now you have to go through an hour's worth of training to make sure you don't do it again. So I know for sure that I'm not going to get, I'll be a little bit more vigilant next time about not clicking on a UPS tracking email address in the future.
It's providing that safe learning experience, right? Yeah, you clicked, but in this case, it's not going to do any harm, and much better to click and learn in a safe simulation versus a real scam. Because, I know IronEdge has these kinds of resources like we're looking at here, that ongoing security awareness training that can really change employees' behavior and establish those good habits. But most importantly, create that culture of security within your organization. We've focused a lot on the fact that our employees, while often our greatest assets, can also sometimes be the weakest link in security. And I'm not talking about that rogue or malicious employee, right? I'm talking about that well-meaning employee who clicks that bad link, opens that bad attachment, uses the same password over and over and over again. We really need to empower those employees to become that strongest link in security by training them to be, vigilant and cautious. Kind of along these lines, just to build on this conversation around phishing, because since it is so prevalent, especially right now, I wanted to kind of underscore the need for that solid security awareness program and show just how easy it can be to launch successful phishing scams. Again, since they are one of the easiest yet most effective ways that employee data is stolen. Phishing kits like what we're looking at here are available for purchase on the dark web, and cyber criminals, even those with minimal technical skills, can easily launch these phishing campaigns using pre-made templates and some step-by-step instructions. And if they don't have a list of targets, not to worry, they can buy mailing lists on the dark web as well. As part of these phishing kits, legitimate websites are cloned, and that login page is changed to a point changed to point to credential stealing sites. So emails are then sent with the links pointing to that new spoofed website. Here's a side-by-side example of the actual Facebook landing page and the landing page included in one of these phishing kits. It's nearly impossible to tell the difference here, and you can see just how effective it is. Most users, probably me included, would be hard-pressed to really be able to tell the difference. Or here's another one, this one for eBay. Again, just as difficult to discern the real from the fake here. And I think these examples show why these kits can be so effective, and because they make it so simple and effortless to launch, it's a pretty compelling business proposition for bad actors who are looking to profit off our data. So we know that the dark web kind of refers to that part of the internet that's intentionally hidden and inaccessible through standard browsers and methods. We know there's this thriving marketplace there for the buying and selling of stolen credentials, but we may not have a clear picture of what exactly the dark web looks like, how it operates, how cyber criminals are able to conduct their business. So we thought it would be helpful to share some actual snapshots that our analysts grabbed so that we can get a good look at the dark web. So here is a snapshot from the dark web. A criminal organization is offering up credit cards to buyers. It's a little bit tough to read here, but it's essentially an advertisement for the full package. That's actual physical credit cards complete with pins and spending limits, pretty much everything that they need to go out and use these credit cards. And how convenient, the seller in this case will even ship to buyers discreetly via FedEx. Or how about this one? It's a big election year, but not even our voter registration is safe. Check out this product offering that includes the personal data for 1.8 million Kansas voters, including names, addresses, date of birth, genders, just a lot of information here. But it's not just in Kansas. Here's the same offer for lots of other states. These are just the ones I could fit on the slide. And notice these prices. This is $10,000 plus for these stolen credentials. So really is an opportunity for cyber criminals to make some really good money off of stolen data.
And easy too. It looks like it's a shopping cart where you just click a button and you add that package to your shopping cart and check out. And then you have an easy way to get access to that information.
Completely. And what's kind of shocking to me too is how this mimics, a legitimate business, right? They've got ratings here, so I can, rate my shopping experience, and I can, it's really interesting to me just how sophisticated these businesses are in this marketplace. Wanted to also touch on a couple of emerging methods that we're seeing cyber criminals use to execute these attacks as well. We've seen this trend where a ransomware attack escalates to extortion. It goes a little something like this. The general consensus has been that if you get hit with a ransom attack, don't pay the ransom, because it's likely that you're not going to get your data back anyway. There's just no guarantee that paying off the cyber criminals will get your data back. But now cyber criminals are saying, okay, fine, you don't pay the ransomware, I'm going to release your data on the dark web to make some money and destroy your business and its reputation. I think it's just yet another example of how cyber criminals are getting smarter and more sophisticated in the way that they're executing these attacks. And as we think about the ways that they can get their hooks into your business and cause all kinds of damage and chaos, it's important to think about what would happen if your business suffered an attack like this, and whether you've got that business continuity plan in place to make sure that if disaster should strike, you're able to minimize that downtime and the overall effects to your organization.
Make sure your backups are good too.
Make sure the backups are good. Absolutely. Yes. And speaking of ransomware, we've seen this emergence of ransomware as a service, which shows, again, just how sophisticated and turnkey some of these methodologies are. Ransomware as a service, of course, borrows from that software as a service or SaaS framework. For a subscription just costing a few $100 a month, cyber criminals can get really nice branded platform just like this to log into. They can add in all of the contacts or companies that they want to launch an attack against, all of the people that they'll send the ransomware to, and there are even pre-made templates ready to go. They can essentially just sit back and monitor the attack through their dashboard, track who's opened, who's clicked the link, who's paid the ransom. This whole ransomware as a service is just a really easy way to operationalize ransomware attacks for deployment on pretty large scale, and it allows even the novice cyber criminal to launch attacks without too much difficulty. And I had to include this if anyone's looking for a career change on the webinar. The Dark Overlord is hiring, and he pays quite well. Don't get any ideas, Patrick. Here's an actual job listing from the dark web. For just 10 years of experience and some innovative thinking, a cyber criminal can make a whopping $762,000 to start, increasing to over $1 million in 2 years. And again, what I find so interesting here is that there's a probationary period, performance reviews, just like a legitimate company might put in place. And finally, lots of us are using Zoom to meet and collaborate while we're working home. We're even using it for this webinar. And as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, lots of people have turned to Zoom to connect. They went from 10 million daily meeting participants in December to 300 million daily meeting participants in April. And with that crazy increase in usage also came concerns around Zoom's security practices. One particular area of concern is that new Zoom bombing phenomenon, where there's uninvited attendees troll Zoom meetings with the sole intent of disrupting the meeting and often doing some pretty disturbing and troubling things. Well, hackers got a hold of a bunch of compromised Zoom accounts and posted them on the dark web so that bad actors can get pretty much everything they need to bomb these meetings. I think in mid-April then, a cybersecurity intelligence firm found more than 500,000 Zoom accounts for sale on the dark web, with them being sold for less than a penny each. So quite a bargain, I suppose.
Yeah, and you probably saw in the news that with kind of that sudden rush to using the service, obviously there's a lot more people there, which means a lot bigger target for hackers. And so there's a lot of scrutiny on Zoom as a company because their security was maybe not the best in the industry. So they said, okay, we'll turn things around. We'll take a refresh look at our security, start implementing new best practice things, adding encryption to their services. So it's important not to just use a service assuming that the company themselves are doing the right things to secure your data, but need to take a look at that with a critical eye. And that's what happened with Zoom is, once they had thousands and thousands of people using it, people were like, well, wait a minute, are you guys doing the right thing? Are you protecting our data? Are you protecting our information? When in fact, they weren't doing a great job. They were doing a pretty good job, but they said, look, we could do better. And so they've been, over the past few months, putting a lot of new security features in place to get more up to snuff.
Yeah, I think just that influx of people just put a renewed microscope, I think, on their security practices, and I think they handled it quite well. Put in place some fixes, which has been really helpful. But I think it also shows how quick hackers are to kind of go where the crowds are, so to speak, right, and follow the trend.
But it's important to evaluate. I know a lot of companies are starting to move their services to the cloud. A lot of cloud-hosted solutions and SaaS-based solutions. It's super important to look at their environment, make sure that they're doing the right things to protect your data, not just assume that's the case, right? So having a critical eye and looking at their environment and what they've done. They typically release reports and white papers and attestations on what they're doing to secure your information. If you're looking to move your stuff to the cloud, it's super important to look at that information to understand that if you do move your data to one of these providers, that is going to be protected. So it's just a cautionary thing that you need to do. They should be protecting your data, but you need to verify that. So trust but verify.
That's a great point. Great point. So we've been talking a lot about the ways that cyber criminals can steal data, how that data is bought and sold on the dark web, how easy and sophisticated their methodologies can be. But this doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, right? There are yes, some serious threats out there that can cause some serious damage to your business. But if we're aware of those threats and if we take steps to increase our security, we really can minimize the risks and help protect your business and your employees. Here are just some tips to start moving in that direction. Some of these we've already touched on, but I wanted to circle back on compliance. Patrick dug into that a little bit. You know, compliance is no longer optional, as we said, and businesses have to take some steps to protect their data and privacy. And as we talked about, it can be overwhelming and time consuming. So definitely lessen that stress. There's automated solutions out there, teams that are ready to step in and help get that web unwoven, I guess, in terms of compliance. We also talked about the ramification of exposed passwords. So it's incredibly important to help employees protect those passwords, both on the network and off, as we talked about, perhaps even through a password manager. We talked about MFA, 2FA, that's that added layer of extra security, part of that zero trust framework that we talked about to ensure that the right users have the right access. And MFA, 2FA can help with that. There are some really great solutions that provide that balance between convenience and security. Monitor the dark web. We talked quite a bit about how exposed credentials can lead to potential catastrophe. Ongoing credential monitoring can provide those critical early alerts that can help prevent a potential costly and widespread data breach. And then finally, you know, bring in a team that you trust to help put together those security strategies that will work best for your company. Really lean on them to provide that guidance and advice that will help you stay on top of the changing threat landscape. You're busy, you have your hands full running your business, you're working hard to build your business. I really do encourage you to protect your business by understanding the risks that we've discussed, but also accepting that there are measures that you can take to minimize those vulnerabilities, and then bring in a team like IronEdge that you trust and that can guide you through that current landscape. I know this team is definitely prepared to help you figure out, you know, where you are today with security, and then put in place a plan to get you where you need to be. And I know they're really focused on keeping community businesses safe and thriving. So I know they've got a good first step here. It's a special offer. So I'll flip here.
I see there's a question that Branson fielded on the Q&As by Allison. She was asking about complex passwords. One of the things, and he nailed it on the head. I just want to expand a little bit on it. So having different passwords and different complex passwords across multiple services and sites is important, but remembering them is always the the hardest part of any of this, you know, of having complex passwords. So using a password manager, LastPass is an industry, you know, the industry giant. Dashlane is another big one. They're basically, the way that they work is you have one master password that you remember, that gets you into your account, and then the password manager then can have, you know, super long complex passwords that you don't need to know, you don't need to remember at all, because the software itself fills it in for you. So you just have to remember one password and change it every once in a while. That's always a good recommendation. But have one, you know, strong password that is able to get you into the service. And then once you're into there, then the service will autofill you the super complex password to your office, you know, your office website, or, you know, your SaaS application. So you can have hundreds and hundreds of different service accounts that have passwords that you don't need to remember. You just need to remember the one to get you into your service, which is like LastPass or Dashlane or a service like that. So I don't know if there's any more questions. So kind of going back to what Kim had said, and if they are, go ahead and, oh, let me see, there's one open question here. Does that work for third-party softwares that you need to use? Software in applications, so the way that it would work, typically speaking, those applications will have local plugins on your computer that you can use to fill in local third-party applications on your system. Either that, or if it doesn't actually fill in the password for you, it's just as easy as logging into the website, and then finding your application, and you can see what the password is, and then you can just copy and paste it. But a lot of these services have plugins that you can install on your computers that you, with a keystroke, will automatically fill in that password, because it knows it's, let's say it's, just some application. It knows that that application exists. It'll automatically fill it, like you just hit like, Alt Tab or something like that, and it'll throw in that password to your local computer. So it's good to have those services. Some of them, they, offer the service for free. It's good to have some sort of management behind it. Like if you can get like a business account or a corporate account where you can manage the user accounts, that way you can lock out a user if, they're terminated and you need to prevent them from accessing those passwords. You can quickly just disable those accounts. But password managers are a huge benefit of having, super complex passwords, but not having to remember those passwords. So that's a great option. And then we have another question. What are the best practices for employees using their home Wi-Fi networks? So what we typically recommend is, oftentimes we will try to push those networks as far away from your corporate network as possible, right? So we want to warn against using VPN services, because what VPN services do is they connect you to the corporate network. And where you get in trouble there is suddenly you have a home network that's not protected, is not monitoring, and you're suddenly connecting that to your corporate network, which you just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and build and protect. You're suddenly opening that up to an unmanaged network. So VPNs they're still in use these days, but it's gotten to a point where it's less and less needed because a lot of the applications are moved to the cloud. And there's other ways you can access your data. Like, we'll typically recommend using remote desktop servers, which bypass that need to get to use VPNs. So we try to eliminate the risk of having home networks connecting to your corporate environment. And so we look at every option first before trying to open that Pandora's box, because once you do that, it becomes very difficult to manage those home networks, especially in this environment where everyone's working at home. We want to try to reduce or eliminate that as much as possible, because you don't want unmanaged computers, unmanaged networks touching your corporate environment. So it's important to, you don't necessarily have to manage the home computers or the home networks or wireless networks. As long as they're not able to touch your corporate network and corporate data, then the risk is severely limited to, if their computer gets infected with a virus, or if their home network's compromised, it's not going to impact your network because they're not talking to it in any way. So we do that. We want to build that wall. We want to build that shield so that you don't have to worry about managing home networks and home computers. Hope that answered your question. But yeah, so again, like we sort of chatted about earlier in the presentation, like approaching these security initiatives can be daunting, and using resources that are out there that are freely available to anyone that's using them, like NIST, the government NIST framework is a great starting point. I encourage you guys to go to their website, take a look at. They have lots of documents and free resources to build that. But we certainly do the same sort of work with our clients, where we sit down and we say, okay, where are we at now, and where can we go, and where do we want to start laying out these initiatives to try and get you guys to a good secure spot. One of the things that from the dark web scan that we're offering, what that does is it's a point in time snapshot of what's out there for your organization right now, like what exists. Like it'll go out there and say, okay, you have 20 email accounts that are being sold on the dark web right now that have your email and passwords. The nice thing about that is it gives you an idea of what's out there. So we can certainly give that to you guys, and you can see, one, if you have any data that's out there for your organization. But two, it gives you an idea of, what what in your network may be at risk or not protected that is getting this data out into the web, right? Maybe you have an old 2008 server that's no longer under support that's somehow compromised and that's leaking data, or a firewall that doesn't have the latest firmware and suddenly somebody's using that to get into your network to grab information. But this little scan is great because it'll tell you, if you have email data or password data that's out there on the web. And it's a snapshot in time. We use this tool as a monitoring tool. It just runs all the time. So if IronEdgeGroup.com pops up on the internet tomorrow, we'll get alerted on it, and it's a great tool that says, okay, is this something that's actionable? We had something that happened actually last week, where we had about 5 or 6 email addresses that popped in the alert, and we looked at it, and was it you, Branson? Were you in that list? It turned out it was a contacts website that got their database breached, and we just happened to have some of our employees, I guess some company was using this website to use contacts or a contact manager, and we just happened to be in that person's contact book. Not that it was a risk to us, but it was good to know that that information is out there. So the worst that can happen is that our email address, they know that Branson's email address, and they may start spamming him for free Viagra or whatever it is. So not really a risk to our organization, but it's good to know that that stuff's out there, right? So it's good. Again, we'll provide that to you guys as a free option, and it's good to see that information. But again, if you have any questions, we're here to help you guys out. And we're certainly here to help you guys look at your security for your organization, figure out what's best for you, what's the best bang for your buck. Because I know you can spend an unlimited amount of money and still not be secure, but really understanding what your business goals are and your business objectives are, and what is the best use of your IT budgets and dollars to get you guys to a point that you feel secure, and that somebody knowledgeable like IronEdge is able to tell you, yes, you guys are doing the right things, you're making the right steps, you're doing the right things like business continuity, incident response, disaster recovery. All these things are important, especially in these situations where COVID comes around and suddenly everyone has to work from home. Are you guys prepared to be in that situation and work in that situation securely? So we're here as a resource to you guys, and we're wanting to help you guys as necessary. I see another question here. Oh no, that's the same question I just answered. So I think that was all the questions. Anything else that we need to add? Okay. All right. Well, I think that would cover it then. So what we'll do is we will make this presentation as a recording available. So if you find this valuable, we'll go ahead and you can share that with your friends and colleagues to look at that. And then again, we'll have this dark web scan. So if you're interested in that, it's a great tool to see if that data is living out there in this snapshot in time. Cassandra, I'll let you have closing comments. I think you're muted though.
You're right. Thank you.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Kim. That was fantastic information. I hope that the attendees enjoyed it. Like Patrick said, we're going to be uploading this webinar, so all of you that attended will get a copy of it, as well as a link for you to interact with us if you are interested in that dark web scan and the consultation to review it. And if you enjoy our IronEdge webinars, please invite people that are in your network next time to join us. We're trying to do these on a bi-weekly basis, so we'll just keep letting y'all know. Thanks, and take care and be safe out there, guys.
Thank you much.